Hello, folks. Welcome back. This is Chris in Central Pennsylvania. It's the 22nd of July, 2025. It's been a few months since President Trump issued his executive order laying out a potential refugee resettlement program for South Africans suffering from unjust racial discrimination. And in the interregnum, since he issued that, all kinds of propaganda that it's for farmers, it's for whites, it's for Afrikaners, it's racist, it's unfair, how uncaring. Of course, we've destroyed all those lies. It's nonsense. It's not for whites. It's not for farmers. It's not for Afrikaners. It's for them and any other racial minority suffering from unjust racial discrimination. And it's not simply for farmers. In fact, most people coming over are not even farmers. And crime is not the qualification for it. You're a victim of crime. That doesn't qualify you to come over. Lots of people are victims of crimes. This is a red herring spewed by a racist in South Africa and right-wingers who don't want you leaving the country for whatever reason, their own parochial interest. The bottom line is crime is not a justification. Crime that is a consequence of racism, however, is a different story. So if you were targeted and attacked because of your race, well, that's unjust racial discrimination. That's who this program is for. But some people have become disillusioned with the refugee program. Let's be clear about this. There was no program. Trump announced it. He called the State Department flat-footed. No one's ever offered refugee status to South Africans, even during apartheid. Just a few asylum cases. No refugee status. So this caught them flat-footed, and they had to respond. 7th of February, issued the executive order. On the 10th of February, they posted on the U.S. Embassy website, za.usembassy.gov in South Africa, information about this. And they mentioned ethnic minorities, which is something in my initial analysis on the 7th of February I said I hope would take place. And they did. But then no information for some time. They included an email address to send an email to the Population Resettlement and Migration Bureau at the State Department who handles these issues, not the embassy. That is not the embassy's job. Stop blaming the embassy. The embassy has nothing to do with it. So people sent emails to that, and a lot did. We don't know the true number. We heard 70,000 sent emails. We heard more than that, and we heard multiple sources. The bottom line is a lot of people sent those emails, and it is impossible for the handful of people to go through all those emails and prioritize them and pick ones based on what's going on. So they, I believe, randomly picked a number of them, called people up, asked them if they'd be willing to come to Pretoria to be interviewed, so they could get a sense of the interest in this program. That was the purpose of that. It created what I call a pilot project, a pilot program. And that pilot program culminated on the 12th of May with the arrival of 59 South African refugees, almost all white, but a colored family also involved, which the media falsely reported, saying was all white, calling them all farmers, and also saying they were 49. They got everything wrong about the program, except doxing people and destroying their lives. That's the only thing they managed to get right in the press. So that was May 12th. On the same day, the State Department on the U.S. Embassy website published the program. And now it wasn't an email, but a statement of interest, a Google form that you fill out, which doesn't have an auto reply. You simply get a thing saying on the screen, it's been submitted. You should have taken a photograph. You should have taken a screen grab. And that's it. And then you wait. Well, many people become disillusioned or frustrated because why am I still here? I had all my hope in this. Well, you're wrong to put your hope in something that you have no control over. That's just foolhardy. And that's not an insult or targeting the people who are putting their hope there. I understand where you're coming from. But you have unrealistic expectations. And I turn now to a video that Professor G published today talking about bad news for asylum seekers. Well, I've been telling people all along it's bad news. Almost nobody gets approved for asylum. I think it's a foolhardy approach. And no one knows the true answer. People are asking for advice of Professor G. He's a lawyer who does asylum cases. People asking me for advice. What should they do if they have H-2A visas and they're currently working in the States? Well, the only thing I can tell you is that you have to be in South Africa in order to qualify for the program. So if you apply for it, you have to go back for an interview. Does going back there negate the fact that you need refugee status? No, in my view, it doesn't. That's not what the law says. In my view, it's in-country refugee resettlement, and you are not living in America. You don't have an abode here. So you can take whatever advice you want. That's your decision, one you're going to have to make. But I will tell you, if you stay here and overstay your visa and you apply for asylum, your chance of getting it are slim and none. And Slim just left the building. Sorry, I don't mean to be callous, but that's the reality. Your chance of getting asylum are very weak. So you're going to have to go back to South Africa whether you like it or not. Do you want to stay here for 3 or 4 years in limbo and spend tens of thousands of dollars paying an attorney so they get wealthy just to be rejected and be sent back to South Africa and never be allowed to come back even for an H-2A visa? Think about that. That's the consequences. I mean, look, for most people, things aren't so bad you can't go back and hang out there for a little bit before you come back. So, I mean, make your own decision. But a gentleman posted in response to Professor G's video from today, the 22nd of July, his frustration, and I appreciate it. And I responded, and I'm probably going to get flamed and attacked for this, but so what? This is going to be a longer video because I'm going to read his comments here. So the gentleman said, I had great hope that this program could help many of us really trapped in South Africa. I was on the ball very early on and still nothing. Well, first mover doesn't guarantee anything. I appreciate that you were quick. I'm starting to realize I might have misplaced my hope and trust in a very fragile and arbitrary and it seems whimsical system. Well, you have no basis to make such an analysis. That's your opinion, and it's not well informed. And I shudder to think how many could be facing the realization and trauma of false hope. Well, that's your fault. That's your fault. If I was offered refugee status, the first thing I would do is go online and learn about what refugee status is and learn what happens to refugees. And my eyes probably been like, wow, people sit in Kenya for 10, 15 years waiting to get out. People sit in Chad for years. Having to come to terms with the fact that their nightmare here will continue. Well, that's South Africa's fault, not ours. And yes, it's easy to say you really shouldn't rely or place one's hope in people, but not so easy to say if they face what we face daily. It doesn't change the logistics of what has to happen on this end. As a man, I despise the fact that we've become so weak as to have placed beg for our lives in the hands of strangers and people far disconnected from the brutality we actually faced. Well, you're wrong about that. People like myself that know exactly what's going on are the people working on this program and pushing for it to happen. So you're unaware of what's actually going on. People playing silly political games. No one's playing any political games. And that's a lack of gratitude. People have risked their political futures. People have risked their careers to help you get out of South Africa. And instead, you're posting comments where you're blaming people and attacking them for playing political games when you have no such information to confirm that. He says, I don't blame them. You don't blame them for playing political games? Well, if people are playing political games, I would blame them. They have the good fortune to have been born in the freest country on earth, and they certainly don't owe the world or other countries anything. I just think there's a lot of thinking and recalibration I have to do presently. It's been a roller coaster ride, and that is not conducive to actual survival strategy. No, it's not. And this is my response to him. I said, unfortunately, you came to unrealistic expectations on your own accord, and that's unfortunate. The reality is that almost no one who noticed the refugee program has any concept whatsoever of what refugee status is or how it works, especially for in-country refugee status, which is an odd duck to say the least. He said it's been a roller coaster ride. It should not have been a roller coaster ride, and it should not be one going forward. A small team of very hard-working bureaucrats are doing their best in the midst of dramatic shakeup at the Department of State, where hundreds of people were just sacked. There's no money in the federal budget in fiscal year 2025. That's the first thing you should know. People just think this money just grows on trees, that people just make things happen, that airlines just give you free flights, that investigations are done overnight. Trump also suspended all the resettlement money for 90 days back in January. The reality is that any South Africans who've come over to the U.S. this fiscal year, which ends September 30th, is a miracle in and of itself. It's a small miracle. Now, if folks were realistic and listened to my advice, they'd be better off. If you, that would be South Africans suffering from unjust racial discrimination, have any interest in the program, complete the statement of interest, go about your life, and be ready when you're contacted. You, and I'm not talking to the person who posted this, but anyone, are just one of hundreds of thousands of statements of interest that they're working through. You're not special. You're not owed anything except the courtesy of a response at some point. That said, South Africans are arriving in the U.S. almost daily under the program. I find it interesting that same folks who tolerate a corrupt, inept government having a single driver's license machine for 63 million people expect that 2 months after a program started that they should be permitted entry into the U.S. My security clearance investigation took 6 months in the Army when I was 23 years old. And I hadn't done much in life. Folks need to dial back their unreasonable expectations. Screening, background investigations, adjudication of your case, medical screening, funding from taking from Peter to pay Paul in a fiscal year when no money was allocated for you, coordination with the Department of Homeland Security for relocation, coordination with the NGO and the case officer on the ground in 48 different states, the breadth and length of a continent. Folks really have no concept of what is involved here. The 650,000 unfortunate souls who live in a refugee camp in Kenya and have been waiting to get out of that hell for decades. And South Africans are disillusioned that 8 weeks ago they filled out a form and are not currently sitting in Atlanta. Now, I'm sure some folks' feelings are going to be hurt by this response that I put out here. It's not intended to hurt anyone's feelings. It's just intended to open your eyes. And I thank the gentleman who posted the comment because it gives me a chance to elaborate on this topic that people need to pay attention to. You're owed nothing. People are bending over backwards to accommodate you. And some people are just totally ungrateful. They have expectations that are unrealistic. You are not coming to America until the screening is done, as I've said, from February 7th and in hundreds of videos prepared and live streamed since then. The State Department has an obligation to ensure the people that it lets come in this country as refugees have been thoroughly vetted to screen for terrorists, pedos, rapists, murderers, criminals that we don't need here. We're busy kicking illegals out now that are that. And also that you're not a threat to the health and safety of Americans. Beyond that, they have to have an obligation to ensure, particularly in-country refugee resettlement, that you have a legitimate basis for coming here. And you're not just an economic migrant. And frankly, a lot of people who are complaining about this program, not this poster, but a lot of people complaining about this program are really just economic migrants who are trying to glom onto the program. And you know it from their approach. Well, I want to live here. What about this? I want that. You want? Refugee programs are designed for people whose life is in peril. If they're not relocated, they will be dead, or they'll continue to suffer unjust misery and be discriminated against. That's what the program is for. And that applies to millions of South Africans. Millions. So, once again, people need to have realistic expectations of what they've signed up for. You haven't signed any contracts. You haven't been promised anything. You haven't been offered an opportunity to play for Kaiser Chiefs. You have filled out a Google form on a website that collates the data and sends it to the PRM Bureau at the State Department, which is reeling from the losses of hundreds of employees in the past week or 2 weeks. They are trying to get people over here. And the fact that you are the priority over the rest of the world doesn't seem to dawn on South Africans. Instead, people just want to say they're disillusioned or complain about the program. Frankly, I think the fact that the program continues despite the ingratitude and the attacks on the program by the media in South Africa and by politicians in South Africa, people ought to take notice of that. People are still working their tail off to help South Africans get out. Does that hurt your feelings? Well, then you can't handle the truth. I've targeted no one here. I've attacked no one personally. And I thank the gentleman who posted the comment on Professor G's channel because it gave me a chance to elaborate on this. Folks, if you're waiting 6 months from now, that's not an unreasonable amount of time to wait. And if you think it's unreasonable, then don't fill out a statement of interest. Continue to live your miserable life in South Africa. I mean, ostensibly, that's why you want to get out, because you have a miserable life. But you don't want to get out. So if you've grown frustrated with this process, it's unfortunate, folks. But who else made you an offer? Australia? The UK? Ireland? Canada? New Zealand? Did they offer to let you come as a refugee? In which you pay nothing to go? In which you pay nothing to resettle? In which you get handed money left and right from taxpayers? None of them have done that. It's either this program or you stay in South Africa. Now, I hope you get your call in what you consider timely fashion. But if you've been waiting 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and you're upset, then you have unrealistic expectations. This is a very complicated process and involves a lot of moving parts. And my recommendation to everybody is that in the meantime, live your life as best you can. Go about your life. You have no control over what happens next. So don't stress yourself out. I realize that's easier said than done. But what other advice can someone give? Be angry, be upset, be pissed off, blame the Americans, hate America? What is that going to accomplish? You decide, South Africa. It's up to you all. Get out of the ball. Cheers.